In 2013, President Xi Jinping was appointed with a promise to remove corruption from China. Since taking power, he's continued to crack down on thousands of politicians for collaborating with criminal groups or embezzling money from the state. In 2020, more than 3,000 organized crime gangs with close ties to the triads in Hong Kong were swept up in another nationwide crackdown.
First, as you heard, we're introducing a national freeze on handguns. This means that individuals will be prohibited from buying, selling, importing, or transferring handguns in Canada. Some 55,000 new handguns have been registered on average every year over the last decade, a nearly 75% increase over that period. We're putting an end to that trend. And we are not waiting. Mr. Speaker, overall crime rates in this country are much lower than what they were decades ago. But while we are seeing a general downward trend in crime, these statistics don't tell the whole story. There's no question that illegal guns are increasingly finding their way into the hands of criminals and gang members. Handgun thefts have recently jumped up by nearly 40%. Break-ins and illegal sales in Canada are only compounding the problem.
I'm always willing to acknowledge the overwhelming majority of hunters and farmers and sport shooters in this country are law-abiding. They're responsible and conscientious. They deserve our respect because they earn our respect, because they adhere to our laws.
This display of firearms in front of you is of the 62 firearms seized, 58 were traced, 4 were untraceable, 4 of the AR-15 types were untraceable, no serial numbers, no make and model. Of the remaining 58 that were traced, 57 were traced to the United States, to US, primarily Arizona and Texas, and only one of these firearms was traced to Ontario. It was a stolen firearm from a break-and-enter back in 2021. So in essence, the overwhelming, whatever that is, 98% of these firearms are traced from the US. So that speaks to the Chief's comment about our border integrity and the flow of illegal crime guns coming up from the United States.
Mr. Speaker, there's an establishment in my riding, which is in the middle of Toronto, a great family establishment called Playtime Bowling. And it's a place where mothers and fathers can take their children, their loved ones, to kick back at the end of a busy week, where they can distract themselves with a little bit of close time with the ones that they care for, the ones that they work for every day. I take my girls there, like many families do in my community. And the reason why I'm referring to this establishment at the outset of my remarks is a little less than 2 weeks ago, on a weekend night, shots rang out. And shortly after those shots rang out, 2 people's lives were lost.
But this killing isn't the only killing that made headlines.
This is not a random killing, it is targeted. Noel's own father was the victim of a violent attack on March 25th, 2014. He was shot multiple times after he opened the front door of his Symington Avenue home. The suspects fled in a dark-colored minivan. His wife and another family member, police never named at the time, were home.
Nook No was the father of a known Chinpak gang member named Tan No, and he was home when his father was shot. Tan was the intended target, but the shooters claimed his father's life instead. But the Asian assassins really wanted Tan dead because 4 years later, on March 19th, 2018, Tan was killed at a bowling alley located in North York.
2-year-old Tan No. Investigators believe the bullets were meant for No. The suspects fled in a dark-colored vehicle. Court documents obtained by Global News suggest No was involved with organized crime. It's believed he was associated with Chin Pak, a gang that's been around in Toronto since the early 2000s.
Tan and Ruma didn't know each other. She just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
One of the victims that who lost their life just outside of this family establishment had been at an IKEA earlier in the day and had been shopping for a cradle in anticipation of starting their own family. And this person was described as caring and humble. That's one more life that's been snuffed out as a result of gun violence. And it's for this reason that so many within the law enforcement community, within the police community, within the victims' communities have been calling for gun law reform for so long. This is part of a disturbing trend which we've seen not only in my community, not only in the city of Toronto or the GTA, but right across the country. And I think that it's something that all members should be fully grasped with. The first set of proposals we've introduced would help to stop firearms from falling into the wrong hands. These measures would spell out quite clearly that if you are planning on selling or giving a non-restricted firearm, you must verify that the person acquiring it has a valid firearms license. In Toronto, there were 61 homicides in 2017, many of which were associated with some form of gun violence. In 2018, there have been 28 shooting incidents already reported. This number is up 55% from this point in time last year.
Some of Canada's best-known rising rap stars has had long-standing affiliations with two of Toronto's most notorious gangs. These gangs are Driftwood and Regent Park. But neither raids nor community policing has disrupted how Driftwood and Regent Park operates.
While some of our largest cities are hardest hit by these statistics, this isn't just an urban problem. Rural and Indigenous communities are also affected.
Canada's largest street gang in history, named the Indian Posse. We'll be taking a look at the Native Syndicate, an Indigenous-based crime gang in Saskatchewan, Canada.
Both the Chin Pack and Asian Assassins are considered to be street-level thugs, but they have ties to the Triads. Both gangs are known to push a lot of firearms and a lot of narcotics in their area.
And there are demands among our young people. You know, if people are afraid, if our kids are afraid, some of them might be tempted to acquire a gun to protect themselves.
But this was not the first or even the second time that the police have tried to eliminate the Driftwood or Regent Park gangs. Police filed 700 drug and weapons charges against gang members. 3 top-ranked gang members were among more than 100 people who were detained. The cops seized almost 3 dozen weapons and drugs valued over $1 million.
Canada is home to some of the oldest, largest, and wealthiest triads in the world, with most concentrated between Toronto and Vancouver.
If a gang is in a dispute with another gang over turf for whatever reason, then they may be inclined to go and get their hands on guns to advance their own criminal purposes. We've got to work in our communities to keep our kids out of those gangs and to help our kids feel safe and secure in their own communities.
Not all members of the gang were hardened criminals. The Native Syndicate likes to recruit members when they're very young. We're not talking about people in their 20s here. We're talking early teens.
The rappers that are affiliated with Driftwood and Regent Park are as carefree and fearless as they are ruthless and vicious.
Chinese gangs everywhere. They were shooting each other to pieces.
Chinese crime lords have operated as shadow governments with their own laws and their own severe forms of punishment.
Bill C-5 addresses systemic racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system by promoting a fairer and more effective justice system that, among other things, will provide courts with increased judicial discretion at sentencing through the elimination of some mandatory minimum penalties. I'm proud of the announcement our government made Monday to crack down on firearms in Canada, including raising maximum penalties for many firearm offenses.
Project Weaver began in September 2020 after the development of intelligence indicated significant firearms and drug trafficking activity in southwestern Ontario, namely Brantford and London. We were able to identify 4 distinct and unrelated criminal networks responsible for trafficking firearms, explosives, cocaine, and cannabis. The first network includes members of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in London area, responsible for trafficking cocaine in large quantities, illegal cannabis, and a loaded firearm. The second independent criminal network has been trafficking firearms and cannabis in the London area. The third independent criminal network is responsible for trafficking firearms and cocaine in the Brantford area. Finally, the fourth independent criminal network has been engaged in trafficking offensive weapons, including firearms and explosive devices, and large quantities of cocaine in the Brantford and Hamilton area. These offensive weapons include grenades, a grenade launcher, and explosive projectiles, to determine the source of the explosives and offensive weapons. We have determined that these are not Canadian military explosives, though they were made to look like military-grade equipment. On Tuesday, March 9th, the investigative team executed 11 search warrants, 2 in London, 4 in Brantford, and additional search warrants in Ancaster, Paris, St. Thomas, Oakland, and Barrie. The search warrants were conducted with assistance from the OPP Emergency Response Team. As a result of Project Weaver and the admirable collaboration between law enforcement, we have removed 31 firearms, 81 grenades, 10.85 kilograms of cocaine, and 216 pounds of illegal cannabis from reaching our communities.
Police say they've now dismantled a large-scale gun and drug trafficking network that stretched across Ontario and into the U.S. For more on this operation dubbed Project Monarch, we go live now to CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Steve, tell us a bit more about this.
Well, Chanel, this is a classic example of exemplary police work when it comes to the collaboration of different police services, not only across the province of Ontario, but also in the United States as well. So we heard from many senior officers at this press conference today up in York Region, and in attendance, of course, was York Regional Police, Peel Regional Police, the OPP, Walpole Island First Nations, which is just across the river from Port Huron, Michigan, the OPP, the United States Homeland Security, and our Canadian Border Services as well. 27 firearms were seized in this 10-month covert project. And you can see all of these are semi-automatic weapons with magazines, which can be extremely dangerous to anybody who has a criminal intent and has one of these firearms in their hands. There's a quantity of cocaine and fentanyl as well. $1.3 million is estimated to be the street value of all the drugs, and 20 of the 27 firearms were confirmed to have come from the United States. It is believed that the other 7 will be traced back to the U.S. as well. So it is a huge concern, and Chanel, of note, there are no long guns. All of the guns that are here, and the concern for the police, as we heard from the Deputy Chief of York Region earlier on, they are handguns. And for the obvious reason, handguns can be hidden, they can be taken out very quickly. And when it comes to long guns, they are very dangerous as well. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But at least with a long gun, people can see that and get out of the way. Handguns are a different story altogether. And
in relation to the 27 seized firearms, I can tell you that a number of them had their serial number obliterated or altered. This is a common technique that's employed by criminals to prevent law enforcement from successfully tracing the point of origin. As the deputy indicated, 20 out of the 27 firearms have been traced to the United States, including Florida, Ohio, and Michigan. And we believe that the balance of those firearms, the 7 remaining, will also be traced to the United States.
To date, 114 individuals have been arrested, and once complete, approximately 800 charges will have been laid, including offenses related to participating in a criminal organization, firearm-related offenses, including unlawful possession of firearms, firearms trafficking and importation, charges in relation to illegal drug activity, including possession and trafficking, shootings, and additional weapons charges, and human trafficking offenses. Also seized as a result of this operation were the 31 firearms you see before you, including 4 overcapacity magazines, 7 kilograms of cocaine, 2 kilograms of fentanyl, 2 kilograms of crystal methamphetamine, as well as a host of other drugs, including heroin, Oxycontin, Percocets, and MDMA, and over $300,000 in Canadian currency. These firearms, we allege, were used in brazen shootings, and many were held by alleged drug dealers who had armed themselves for the purpose of establishing and maintaining control over the lucrative drug trade and in ongoing battles over territory agencies. Project Sunder has significantly disrupted the criminal operations and hierarchy of the Eglinton West Crips gang.
Bill C-21 builds on the action we've already taken. As you heard the Prime Minister say, 2 years ago, we banned AR-15s and other assault-style weapons under the leadership of my friend and colleague Bill Blair. This important decision prohibited over 1,500 models of assault-style weapons. Since then, over 300 more have been added. We also committed to a mandatory buyback program to get these weapons off of our streets once and for all. First, as you heard, we're introducing a national freeze on handguns. This means that individuals will be prohibited from buying, selling, importing, or transferring handguns in Canada. And we are not waiting for this bill to pass to take action. Today, we table changes to regulations under the Firearms Act to bring these handgun prohibitions into force as soon as possible.
We identified a fairly robust criminal network surrounding this specific individual, who we believe were also involved in the distribution of controlled substances, as well as firearms. firearms that we believe, drugs that we believe were being trafficked here in York Region and across the GTA. As such, we formed a joint forces operation with the partners you see here today, dubbed Project Monarch. An area who we believe was involved in illicitly importing firearms into Canada from the United States. We believe that one of the points of entry for these smuggled firearms was Walpole Island. Walpole Island is a First Nations community in Western Ontario. It borders Port Huron, Michigan, and is separated by the St. Clair River. This is a channel of water that acts as an international boundary between Canada and the United States.
We also committed to a mandatory buyback program to get these weapons off of our streets once and for all. And today, I can confirm the imminent launch of the initial phase of this program as we begin consultations with industry on compensation. And we intend to publish further details about the compensation system this summer. The first
I want to say, indeed, it is time to take collective police action to prevent serious crimes within our communities and to stop the flow of dangerous weapons and firearms through First Nation territories. These illegal weapons ultimately assist with the commitment of crime in large urban areas such as Toronto and present a real danger to public safety and to human lives. To do this, the Walpole Island Police Services requires adequate resources to implement their part in the overall plan. We need those resources immediately. We only have about 9 to 11 officers in the field. We have one boat. I now say this to the Premier, Premier Ford, and to Prime Minister Trudeau. Open up your considerations to flow the necessary adequate financial resources to get this job done. We need those resources immediately. We only have about 9 to 11 officers in the field. We have one boat. I now say this to the Premier, Premier Ford, and to Prime Minister Trudeau. Open up your considerations to flow the necessary adequate financial resources to get this job done.
Finally, we will soon implement a mandatory buyback program to get these weapons of war off of our streets for good. Building safer communities, banning assault weapons, buying them back, addressing the root causes of gun crime are all of the things that we need to do as part of a comprehensive strategy to end gun violence and to make sure that our communities are safe.
The Outlaw Motorcycle Club. The search resulted in 6 arrests ranging in age from 18 to 36. All were charged with 9 offenses, including 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance, possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose, unauthorized possession of a prohibited device, and possession of a firearm obtained by crime.
The triads operate in a country with a significant immigrant Chinese population, and Canada is no exception. In the 1930s, Wo Shing Wo, the oldest triad branch, decided to set up a foreign syndicate in Toronto. They were soon flooded by others, like the Sun Yi On and the 14K. At one point, the triads were so prominent in Toronto that the Toronto police had to set up an Asian organized crime task force. In Vancouver, the triads go back over 100 years and have close ties with branches in Hong Kong.
Would you like to go to Africa or some tiny island in Pacific, or would you like to go to the Maple Leaf? I would choose the Maple Leaf.
How many criminals bought their way in? Well, the half-hearted RCMP investigation turned a blind eye to that. But this scandal was about to take a new twist.
In 2011, it was estimated that criminal gangs associated with triads controlled 90% of the heroin trade in Vancouver. On January 22, 2021, Chinese drug pin Su Chi-lop made headlines when he was arrested by Dutch police at Schiphol Airport on his way to Canada from Taiwan. Su Chi-lop was the dragon head behind international crime super syndicate Sam Gore, also known as The Company. Su immigrated to Canada in 1988. Su was able to rise to power in just a few short years as the leader of the vast multinational drug trafficking syndicate Sam Gore. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes estimates that Sam Gore generated between $8 billion and $17.7 billion in revenue from meth in 2018 alone. Su was a bigger player in the global drug trade than Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and possibly even Colombian cartel leader Pablo Escobar.
The Chinese-born Canadian citizen has been nicknamed Asia's El Chapo. They are willing to work with just about anybody as long as they can make money. And therefore, they become a much more significant threat to the safety of the citizens of this country.
And at the same time, I'm always willing to acknowledge the overwhelming majority of hunters and farmers and sport shooters in this country are law-abiding. They're responsible and conscientious. They deserve our respect because they earn our respect, because they adhere to our laws and all of the rules, and they're careful and thoughtful about how they purchase, use, and store their firearms. But these weapons are used for killing people. And so there's not a lot of support among hunters and farmers. And so part of the pushback is what we call deception and obfuscation. They try to suggest that, no, you're going to ban shotguns, which are used for hunting, and that's not true. There's a lot of misinformation that they'll put out. And I don't care about that, to be honest with you.
Earlier this spring, I officially launched the $250 million Building Safer Communities Fund. In partnership with community leaders, we're helping young people to make good choices and to set themselves up for success for life. There are other provisions within Bill C-21 that address straw purchasing, replicas, and the glorification of gun violence. These are responsible, common-sense measures that all Canadians can get behind.
For some people, this is about Hollywood. It's about money and glamour. You can see Scarface here. You can see all this money, drugs, jewelry in the millions of dollars. This was all in the street until Peel Police, through this special project, shut it down. The question now is, will the courts deal with this? Because in the courts is the only place where you're going to get justice. If these people are released right away, then all of this continues.
Ended up seizing 34 firearms, illegal handguns, automatic weapons, handguns that have been modified to fully automatic capacity with higher capacity magazines as well. So, 35 guns to me represents a lot of lives saved.
Say about what's going on out on the streets?
Yeah, it says that the people that are involved in that type of activity have absolutely no care for anyone outside of themselves or their organization.
New Money So Sick Gang. They even have their own logo. They have their own jewelry where they have the map of the area they control.
Well, what I'm holding is an area of Brampton and of Mississauga, of the here Ontario and Dundas type area, where this is one of their areas of control. The So Sick chain on this side is one of the representations of their gang. You have the confounded face as well, which is one of their symbols, as you can see on the So Sick, and then Chad's holding on to some other pieces.
Yeah, this one here is a smaller piece, is kind of the same thing as the Mississauga one. It's the Brampton area control for the drug network, along with the So Sick emoji at the top. And then there's a shrimp that is diamond encrusted here that was made for one of the members, nicknamed Shrimpy.
You can see the firepower that they use to enforce that. You can see the product and also the profit over my shoulder here. This is not funny. People die because of it, and people are at risk because of it. Now, the Peel Police shut this down. The time will tell what happens next, but we do know that this gang is now out of business. For the Toronto Sun, I'm Joe Warmington.
And I can tell you this in terms of all of my colleagues who own guns as part of our job as law enforcement and investigate gun issues every day. The people at the forefront of that just shrug their shoulders and go, I guess if it makes someone somewhere think that they're doing something, that's great. But that's not what's going to happen. It will not change one thing from a law enforcement standpoint anywhere. There are handguns all over, they're all illegal, and they're in the hands of criminals. And that the people that legitimately own them, they're in safes and being taken to gun clubs. The two sections don't intersect. I can tell you that the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police have indicated that that won't make any difference. When we seize handguns, the handguns are always almost 100% in the possession of people who have no legal right to possess them. They're almost always illegally obtained. I simply don't see, as a 27-year veteran, how adding another layer of law will make any difference anywhere in this country. And I guess it might make some people feel good, but it will not change the threat level one iota. People are going to get their hands on handguns. We live next door to the largest gun market in the entire planet. If you want guns, you're going to be able to get handguns. And saying somehow that they shouldn't be legal, and the discussions are, from what I understand, that they should be illegal in certain jurisdictions. So I legally own a gun in Ile-des-Chênes, and it gets stolen, it gets brought into Winnipeg. The current laws deal with all of that very effectively, and having some jurisdictional law in a particular area, and I can tell you this in terms of all of my colleagues who own guns as part of our job as law enforcement and investigate gun issues every day, the people at the forefront of that just shrug their shoulders and go, I guess if it makes someone somewhere think that they're doing something, that's great, but that's not what's going to happen. It will not change one thing from a law enforcement standpoint anywhere.
Hi, I'm Dr. Terry Bryant, Alberta's Chief Firearms Officer. On November 22nd, the federal government proposed amendments to Bill C-21 that would vastly increase the number of firearms covered by the bans this bill would entrench in legislation. Adding amendments of this sweeping nature near the end of scrutiny by the House of Commons is not how Parliament is supposed to work. It suggests the federal government has not been entirely forthcoming about its true intentions all along. This relentless persecution of the law-abiding firearms community must stop. Canadians would be vastly better off if the federal government applied this same relentlessness to the pursuit of actual criminals. The amendments are also a stab in the back to the thousands of Canadians who attempted to obey the law by buying firearms that were not on the previously announced ban list. They now find they are also to lose their property with no specific plan in place to even compensate them. We will oppose this measure by every means possible.
I'd like to thank the parliamentary committees for allowing us to speak today about the significant safety concern relating to firearms. Also like to acknowledge real quick those families that have lost a loved one due to violence, in particular with firearms. Myself, I've been in police leadership for approximately 20 years, serving both as a police chief in 2 services, currently Edmonton, as mentioned, and a former deputy minister of public safety. As a police service in Edmonton, most of our gun crime happens with handguns. We support any legislative tools and powers that might help enforce and prevent gun crime in Edmonton. Bill C-21 acknowledges that while law enforcement plays a crucial part, we must build society-wide capacity to find a balance between education, suppression, intervention, and prevention. Give you a bit of a local context. Over the last 2 years in Edmonton, like many other jurisdictions, we have seen an increase in illegal ownership of violence use of firearms. In 2022, we've taken 528 firearms off the street. Year to date, our officers have responded to 127 shootings, 50% resulted in injury, 85% considered targeted. In the same time frame in 2021, 125 shootings, 57% result in an injury, which had the potential for bystanders to be injured. Most of the violence remains targeted through provides little comfort to the communities who are often left reeling the aftermath of gun violence happening in their backyards. We continue to work diligently to mitigate these crimes, but the gang and organized crime groups driving gun violence are growing more brazen and so disregard for the law, including the legislation we're discussing here today. Now, I want to break this into 2 parts. There's things that we support and there's some things that we have some serious concern with, and I'll try to run through those real quickly. I'm encouraged by parts of Bill C-21 that strengthen our existing approach to firearms, the proposed implementation of new offenses, intensified border controls, and stronger penalties combat trafficking and smuggling, all beneficially deterring the criminal element. Provisions prohibit the import, export, and sale of replica firearms is also greatly appreciated. The use of replica firearms to commit crime is something that we see quite often in Edmonton. Now, while these are good first steps, we must have balanced and impactful legislation. And I just want to go into, I have concerns, and certainly EPS has concerns about the logistics, resources, and long-term impacts of other portions of this proposal. Handgun freeze. A handgun freeze will reduce the number of handguns in circulation in the long run. That is the belief. In the short term, we expect that those wanting to acquire guns will find alternatives, increasing incidences of smuggling, 3D printing, and conversion of airsoft guns. This may also increase the commodity value, motivating individuals, including lawful firearms owners, to sell their handguns through illegal channels, knowing the restrictions drive up monetary value. Additionally, we share a border with one of the largest sources of handguns. A freeze would limit our ability to trace transactions originating within the U.S. and will be unable to locate a point of sale. We are told on a ban that the ban of handgun transfers resulted in an increase in handgun sales, with approximately 20,000 handguns purchased since the ban and 12,000 transfer applications still waiting to be processed. The red flag law, well, it's well tended. However, many of the proposed powers already exist under Section 117 of the Criminal Code. As it stands, the law would pose a significant draw on police resources should numerous applications be granted in a time where many Canadian police services are stretched thin. This could further increase service demands. Expanded license revocation. And a lawful firearms owner is no longer able to purchase handguns, they may not be motivated to renew their license. This may lead to an increasing number of expired licenses and individuals no longer authorized to possess handguns. There's already a backlog in enforcement in Alberta. There's already 3,700 revoked or expired PALs, possession acquisition license, some dating back to 20 years that aren't being enforced. The RCMP does not have the resources to enforce these expirations. To get a permit for a firearm is a lengthy process. These impacts the freeze, expands license revocation, mean that police may lose vital information of proactive service. The buyback program. Police service still waiting more information. The implementation of the buyback program, like other service, I should share concerns how it will impact police resources, and I'm not actually sure what the benefit might be. Not long ago, we had a large shooting event. I want to share a success story of just how this works. Multiple shooters in relation to a large crowd outside an individual, some deceased, some injured. Through the work that we did in relation to that, getting the firearm, finding the firearms, tracing the ammunition, we basically were able to trace this to a gun that came up through the U.S., did multiple shootings in another Canadian jurisdiction. As a result, we, in a very short period of time, had 4 people in custody, preventing further offenses. If we don't start investing in the Canadian system, and our ATF is a better partner in the Canadian system, particularly the Forensic Laboratory Service, this would have took us up to a year to actually solve. Steps to strengthen our current approach and investigative tools will bring us long-term change and meaningful. I heard it earlier today, focus on the people pulling the triggers and the motivation. We've had 3 of our 25 homicides this year to date have been the use of handguns. The reality, if we have somebody that's motivated to do this, I'm not sure when you look at the criminal element that the handgun freeze is going to solve that, but it is going to put more strain on resources. So I look forward to the questions. And just to end that, we had 528 guns seized today, and approximately 19% of those are handguns. So look forward to your questions, and thank you for your time.
On this edition,
Hi, I'm Terry Bryant. Since last September 1st, I am the Alberta Chief Firearms Officer. As Chief Firearms Officer, I have 2 main responsibilities. I have a mandate letter, which means that I run the Canadian Firearms Program in Alberta as it is currently structured, but I also have a mandate to advocate for change, and that change should be in the direction of ensuring that the law targets the people who are doing bad things and leaves law-abiding firearms owners to their peaceful activities as much as possible. And so to that end, I have just recently written a letter to the Federal Minister of Public Safety, the Honorable Marco Mendocino, in which I indicated that I called on him to withdraw the order in council, which was passed in or implemented in May, banning over 1,500 types of modern and traditional military and modern and traditional sporting firearms, and many other military artifacts, historical treasures. And I called on him to either drop that prohibition altogether, or if he can't drop it altogether, to at least allow provinces to opt out. The reasoning behind this is something that I think can appeal to both gun owners and non-gun owners alike. Gun owners, of course, understand that this is a meaningless waste of money. It's probably going to cost billions of dollars. It will be another multi-billion-dollar boondoggle, just like the long gun registry. And they understand that, in essence, there's nothing wrong with these guns. There's no evidence that has been brought forward to show that these guns are anything that represents a danger to the Canadian public when they're in the hands of properly vetted legal Canadian gun owners. For non-gun owners, I think the cost issue is going to be really the big thing. As we saw with the long gun boondoggle, when government says something's going to cost one amount, it often costs a vastly larger amount. So for the non-gun owning public, I think it's really important that they understand how much this is going to cost, how many precious resources it's going to take away, and how many better uses there are for those resources. We should instead be spending that money to hire more border officers so that we can stop guns coming in illegally across the border. We need to hire more firearms officers so we can do a more complete and timely job in processing PAL applications and ensuring that people are properly screened. We need to hire more police officers, particularly in guns and gangs units. A lot of these units they do great work, but they're underfunded. They need more resources, and they need stable resources over the long term. And then finally, we need to not only look at after the criminal acts have been committed, we need to look at preventing them from happening in the first place by having more social workers to keep people out of gangs, drug addiction counselors to get people off drugs, because it's a drug trade that fuels a lot of this criminal trade in guns and the violence that is racking Canadian streets. So I hope Minister Mendocino will respond favorably to my requests. I have offered the full assistance of myself and my team to implement this idea of finding alternative ways of spending the money. I consult widely with law enforcement and other resources within the province of Alberta, and I can give him no shortage of alternative uses of the resources that would be much better ways of spending billions of dollars of taxpayers' precious hard-earned money. Thank you.
So we continue to double down on the stupid in this case, Rosemary, and now we're to the point where it makes it difficult to look back and say, at what point should we have realized how stupid we were behaving? And in the case of Mr. Trudeau, he seems to continue to want to double down on that.